it just changed everything. It changed the dynamic of everything. And I did expect the outcome that were received. I expected a leave vote. And I expected that because when I was listening to the debate before the referendum happened, you could hear what was coming from the people in England. You could hear what their thinking was. You could hear what their concerns were. And they have the numbers. It's a much larger population in England than there is in Northern Ireland, in Wales or in Scotland. But while I was listening to their concerns, I was listening to their, the likes of Question Time, for example, or the national political debate space on media. What I wasn't hearing was any consideration of the impact Brexit would have on Ireland. I wasn't hearing Ireland, either north or south, being included in any of their concerns. With the desire to leave for all their own reasons, which are valid enough, we were not being considered. And I think that is very, very telling, and it's very telling in terms of what I have seen since the referendum results and throughout the negotiations that have been taking place. The Westminster bubble and successive Westminster governments certainly have not been very invested in what happens in Northern Ireland. And I did not hear anything at all about the Good Friday Belfast Agreement being considered, the implications of how Brexit would affect that, nor any of the legal obligations that the Westminster government have to that agreement being considered in any of those wider conversations. Since the negotiations have happened, since the referendum results have been announced, and since the fallout since, we're now looking at being included in terms of, we do want to see a hard border in Ireland, and that's about as far as the conversation goes. And we hear no hard border, so the European Union don't want a hard border, Westminster don't want a hard border, the Irish government don't want a hard border, but nobody's saying what a hard border would be, or what a soft border alternative might be, or the fact that we have an existing seamless border that is working well for everybody, and how we can maintain and uphold that. So I think the border question is something that really does need to be pushed up the agenda an awful lot more, because it is very significant. And I think that James Orr in the last presentation made really, really good comments and showed some very stark moves that are actually happening. The environmental degradation, the queue from global corporates lining up to get their licensing for various mining and environmental projects throughout the borders is already happening. But these are not being talked about, we're not hearing that. And Theresa May is Prime Minister. Theresa May, while she was Home Secretary, was a big supporter of big surveillance, big fan of drones, of people being watched, of this whole surveillance technology. So if we're not going to have a hard border in terms of physical infrastructure, are we going to be moving to this eye in the sky border? The DUP were certainly singing its praises in the early days, but it seems to have slipped off the radar now. We're hearing, is it going to be pushed out into the seas, having these conversations? Will we have a border in the oceans? And I was in Scotland last weekend and just picked up that even that notion would then include several Scottish islands within the border regions as well. It would bring them in. So how does that affect them? We're not even hearing anything about that too. So we're hearing a lot of hypothetical, we're hearing a lot of sound bites, but we're not hearing any evidence, and certainly no in-depth discussion of the impact and outworking of these ideas. And again, I think that's because Ireland is seen as something separate a lot of the time from what the English Brexiteers are really fighting for. The future of Ireland, can't answer that one for you, and again, with back Katie made it very, very clear, the present is really what we should all be focusing on, because it's what's happening in the present and these conversations and any agreements and deals that will set out the future, and nobody knows, because this whole thing is being done on hypothetical possibilities, and we're not seeing the outworkings in terms of any sort of hard agreements or proper evidence being put on the table, certainly not full inclusion of all UK regions, including Ireland, when we are going to be the most severely impacted, good, bad or indifferent. But yes, John opened this session by saying that it has been taken by some political parties, Sinn Féin in particular here in Northern Ireland, to have the conversations for the reunification of Ireland. And one comment that has really stuck with me within the first week when we were all dealing with the results and the shock that a lot of people went into from that was one person said to me that I never thought I would see the day when I went to bed a unionist and woke up a nationalist. And that's really stuck with me, and I think it's a very powerful thing to have said. Because within all of this, what has been, again, negated from any conversations is the very real, tangible, long-term identity crisis that the population of Northern Ireland have. And we still are struggling. This has been a peace process. It is an ongoing process. It is not a done deal. We are working very hard to make it happen, to make it sustainable and to move it forward. But we have never really settled and made people feel comfortable with identities and those multiple identities that we can have here in Northern Ireland. So if you can go to bed a unionist and wake up a nationalist, where did your unionism go? Why does that not feel part of you anymore? So I think that we need to have an awful lot more discussions. And while the reunification of Ireland is a very valid one to have, my question back is simply, when was Ireland ever unified? Because we have been in those struggles for a long time, in that conflict within ourselves for an awful long time. But maybe if we want to talk about a united Ireland, it might be a bit more of an easier approach, certainly for me anyway. But we have to put those identities front and centre, because we also have, Brexit proved a very convenient catalyst, I suppose, for this political vacuum that we now have. Although we brought down the institution under the guise of RHI and the multiple scandals that have come to the fore in our politics here, I definitely still go back to Brexit changed everything. It opened up spaces and possibilities, and people seen opportunities and have been running with them. But we cannot have any conversation without looking at who we are as a people and being inclusive in going forward with that, because that political vacuum, I think, has become, particularly over this summer, we have seen how strained people have become again at very grassroots ground level. We have had a very fractious summer. Issues that I've been working, I'm elected for here in South Belfast, so we have seen, for example, the 11th night bonfires getting bigger, getting more dangerous. We've had the Sandy Row one, which ended up damaging 30 apartments in a high-rise apartment block, just weeks after we all watched in horror at the Grenfell disaster unfold. We have seen shared housing developments, people coming in and putting up UVF flags just to mark territory again. And while no action was taken on that, and those flags continued to fly, and our statutory agencies all felt powerless to go in and do anything about that, it culminated in 4 Catholic families having their doors knocked at midnight by the police service to tell them that they could no longer guarantee their safety and that they were advised that they needed to leave their homes. That was just a few weeks ago. So this whole identity crisis, this political vacuum, this uncertainty, this exclusion from the wider narrative is leading to real hard and traumatic outworkings at ground level in Northern Ireland, and I don't think any of that is being considered in the context of where the British government are having the negotiation deals. We're looking at, we're hearing in various workshops, that, well, at least Michael Gove was running about with a green economics book under his arm. That's not good enough. People need to be confident, people need to have ideas, people need to feel included, and when we have a political vacuum and a political system that has run away from this debate, it has really left it to academics to come up with research, with fact, with ideas and with papers. Because while we did have an executive, they commissioned a paper to be done to look at the possible impacts on Northern Ireland of Brexit. And a white paper was done and produced, and what did they do with it? They kept it in their pockets. They didn't tell us about it, they didn't share that information. and it hasn't been used since. And when we had the referendum deal, or when we were moving forward after the referendum, then our First Minister and Deputy Minister wrote a letter to the Prime Minister. It was a one-page letter setting out their stall, and I think it was very, very contradictory that Arlene Foster, as First Minister and leader of the DUP, a party who campaigned to leave, but yet their ministers wouldn't tell you how they actually voted, and still won't today, are claiming that they want basically everything that we've got at the minute, but we want to leave. And when we look at the whole framework of all the nation states within the EU as a whole, the UK has a very special deal already. It has its own unique deal with the EU, but now they want an even more special deal with the EU. And it may be just, I have very, very little positive to say, but, and I'll maybe try and come back to something to try and pick it up. But while we're hearing that everybody invested within the Belfast Good Friday Agreement are saying that they're hanging on to the 4 words in all its parts, that they will be responsible, that they want to see, you know, that the agreement kept going in all its parts, that they don't want a hard border. I'm going to keep repeating this because what we haven't got are any solutions. But again, in academic papers, it has been good to see that other people have started coming up to say that we could actually use that agreement as the framework for going forward if Brexit is to happen. So if the UK is to leave the EU, to use the structure of the Good Friday Agreement in terms of its 3-strand approach to the mechanisms and the institutions of working together. So when we put that in the context of Ireland, that means East-West, North-South relations and how we work together, but also the inter-Isle relations. So how does GB work with Ireland, North and South as well? Those frameworks are all set within that Good Friday Agreement. But when we're hearing the rampant Brexiteers now starting to demand that no deal is better than a bad deal, so that, you know, no deal's a possibility. And just again, they're not looking at the impact on Ireland, because certainly within the context of their legal obligations under the international treaty that is the Good Friday Agreement, they are legally obliged to uphold that. So if the UK want to leave the EU with no deal, you can bet your bottom dollar that they will be bankrupt within a very short space of time, because several member states will be able to sue them for their negligence to meet their legal obligations under an international treaty that they have all signed, that they have all repeatedly said that they want to uphold in all its parts, and don't want a hard border. So there's nothing matching. When we're hearing the Brexit deals happening, Ireland is being ignored, Ireland North and South is being ignored, and we are being ignored in terms of who we are as a people and where we are and what our conditions are on the ground at the minute. But the political vacuum and the failure of our political system to deliver for the people has been really, really, you know, a spotlight has been shown on it there as well, because I just think we have to look at this summer and the chaos and the trauma that has been played out while our politicians are distracting us in order to try and have conversations perhaps that suit them best, but certainly not the people. Didn't have anything good to end up with.